Peace. Good morning. How you doing? This is Tuesday. Today is Tuesday. Monday kind of flew by, but not really. It was kind of slow, but there was a lot of things for me going on Monday. But Tuesday is here. Tuesday, May the 17th, and for everybody that made it to Tuesday, you're blessed and favored. You're able to see life and light for what it is. And because you have the ability to see life and light in this time, in this daytime, uh, you have another chance to course correct. And today, today's subject and today's title is a little different. I kind of wanted, I wanted to actually name it something else, but I kind of took what it is right now, and it's really going to form itself into whatever it is going to be. Um, Yeah. Today's titles. It's kind of deep. It's kind of deep, but it's only going to be taken or accepted by those who are willing to even walk down that path. And I don't know why it says that in the lower third. Let me fix that. Let me fix that right quick before we um, jump. And pardon self on the time. It kind of it was a conflict within myself, within the title. But yeah, we're gonna get through it. We're gonna work on it, and we're going to push and continue to drive on from internal to external. From internal to external, there's only one way to push from internal to external is to look at it for what it is. Peace. Good morning, Miss Selena. We have to look at it for what it is in order for us to draw uh, ourselves to where we are going to go and where we are and where we're about to go. So we talked about yesterday about perspective. How did you feel about yesterday's message with perspective? What did you learn? What was your takeaways? I want to learn about that. What were your takeaways from yesterday about the word perspective? I mean, I've learned a lot about the word perspective that I've never really just identified and looked at before. um, and it really just touched me in a different way in looking at how perspective really play uh, a role in our lives, and how perspective really play, whether it is a dominant role or a role that we just never identified that it was really our perspective. We looked at it how other people did things and see things and saw things, but instead of looking at what are the internal battles that we deal with, then we're never going to look at things from the right way, or from its proper perspective. So that's what we're going into today. It's kind of like inverted. Yesterday we talked about perspective, and now we're talking about from internal to external. I probably should have done from internal to external, but no, it's coming out how it's supposed to come out, from internal to external. Peace. Good morning, Miss Anderson. So let's go ahead and dive into this. But for a moment, let's let's think for a moment. Think about how your morning is. Think about how your week has been. Think about how your week started. Put your mind in that space. What are you committed to right now? What have you been committed to? And look at that particular thing and say, okay, I'm committed. I'm committed to growing. I'm committed to learning. I'm committed to being the best I can be. I'm committed to learning more. I'm committed to doing more. I'm committed to working smarter. I'm committed to redesigning and redeveloping myself, because I owe it to myself to be great. And when I'm great to myself, I can be greater to a lot of those outside things that I'm committed to. But we have to acknowledge that the inside of you can grow the outside of you. All right, that's enough. A little bit of mind meditation. So, all right, let's go ahead and take that plunge. From internal to external, we're talking about the internal conflict. So, the definition of internal, again, on this platform, you're always going to learn a word and the definition of the word and blah, 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 but you're going to have to look at it for yourself. So, the definition of internal says experience in one's mind, inner rather than expressed, of the inner nature of a thing, intrinsic. So, the inversion on this is red over white, and look at it as it pertains to you. Now, remember, we're talking about internal conflict. The subject that we're on is from internal to external. So, internal is the experience in one's inner nature. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're looking at. The definition of internal is experience in one's inner nature. What have you experienced on the inside of you that is affecting the outside of you? That is what I want you to see. Go ahead and put internal in the chat, because I want you to begin to express the experience that you have gathered from your inner nature. Now, no one is perfect. Everyone has the ability to go through something, but what are you doing when you're going through it? It is the experience in one's inner nature. It's not always going to be a good experience. It's not always going to be a bad experience, but it is an experience in one's inner nature. That is the inside of you. So now when we're talking about the etymology of internal, is like where it's coming from, the word and how it derived. And it said it's pre-Latin for internals, interus, or on the inside, inward. That means there is something that you have to look inward instead of pointing the finger and creating a perspective that does not actually fit the mold that you tried to make it out to be, because you had to look at how and what is my role in these things. What have I done that I could have done different to actually have or create a different outlook? Because if it is internal, if it is interest on the inside or inward, the other meaning, when it looked at the etymology of it, that I love, and it was so deep and so dope that I liked that I highlighted it. Normally I don't highlight in the etymology of the word, but it says situated within. What have you situated within? Because sometimes you placed yourself in a situation that you are situated, that you're so grounded and stubborn on the things that you see that you don't want to look at it from a different perspective. So you allow it to be situated within. Right? Because if we talked about the experience in one's inner nature, so it had become so a part of your inner nature that it was situated within, that you no longer can see anything good about you. So you're now conflicting with your own innermost being. You're conflicting in conflict with your own innermost nature. Situated within. So now let's talk about the external, right? The external is the perception of how people see you. Put external in the chat, and now let's go ahead and expose this thing. So the definition of external is coming or derived from a source outside the subject affected. Now, again, everything that we talk about on this podcast, from the words and the definition and etymology, all of this can be researched for yourself. All I'm doing is putting it out there so you can see it, and then you can go back and research, say, okay, what about this do I see that I do, and how it affects me? So the definition is coming or derived from a source outside the subject affected, the outward feature of something. So the inversion on this is white over red, which is derived from a subject affected. That means it had to come from you. That is a conflict that comes from you. It derived from the subject affected. It derived from the things that have affected you, but because it has affected you so much, it has situated itself deep within inside the root of you. But until you understand that there is a root cause to how you feel, but you have to go and dig so deep within inside of yourself to find that root cause in order for you to change the external view or visual of it. That is something that you change, not something that you want somebody to change, but that is something that you have to change inside of you. If you're ever going to have a newness or something that is going to change, uh, that is going to make it better for you. So now let's go ahead and jump into the etymology of external. The etymology of external says Latin exterior, outward, outer, exterior, comparative to exteriors, on the outside, outward, outer of another country or foreign. And I was like, oh wow, that's crazy, because have the inside of you have been so contorted or so uh rotten that the outside appearance seems foreign to you. Like, I don't really know who this person is because you seem foreign, because the inside, the things that you do on the inside is now affecting the outward appearance of you, and the things that you do and the things that you have completely done. Right? Because now when you have developed that outward appearance that have changed because of the inside of you has really begun to tear down everything. And because it had begun to tear down everything, it's really putting you in a very bad space, because you haven't really dealt with the conflict within. So the outside of you is going to be affected even more because of the conflict within. And until you challenge the conflict within, you will always have an external situation, because you've never dealt with the situation within. So now let's talk about it. Let's take this deep dive. Let's take this deep dive. You ready? All right. So imagine two souls. Imagine those two souls, and those two souls are locked up in a body fighting for dominance. That is the internal and the external you. Both of them are fighting for dominance. One wants to be highlighted, the other wants to be heard, the other one wants to be seen, the other one wants to be loved, the other one wants to be happy, and the other one wants to be left alone. But imagine those two souls locked up in one body fighting for dominance. That inner conflict is the most painful and the most mentally exhausting human burden that battles within even the calmest of hearts. Even the most beautiful person has an inner conflict. Everybody has it. Everybody. And that turmoil that's within inside is called your inner you. So if you have an inner you that you have yet to work on, then you're gonna have a hard time with the exterior. People are like, oh man, I see the pain. You ever seen somebody say, man, I see the pain, it's written all over your face? That's because the internal portion, the internal person have become have now become tried to be masked by the exterior, but the internal have began to be much more dominant than the exterior. So that conflict, you can see it on that person's face. So now we have to understand that when it actually is created, it's very unfortunate that we have to understand that it was created by ourselves. I don't care what someone say, I don't care what someone does. How you respond is something that you create. how you respond. It's not always what someone has done to you, but how you respond to it is what is going to possibly alter how you see yourself and how you begin to change ultimately what you are about to do. So now we're going to go into the question that I have. Does the inside of you match the outside of you? Can you answer that honestly? Does the inside of you match the outside of you? So now let's go into dealing with the conflict within, because the first thing that you have to understand is, can you identify the conflict? Can you identify the conflict? Because when you begin to free yourself from a situation, you have to identify it first, right? It's like saying, I want to free myself out of this cage. So now you can identify the cage is the conflict. But in order for you to get out of the cage, you can identify, so, okay, the cage doesn't have a lock, but I've been sitting inside this cage for a long time that I never knew that I can actually get out. But until you identify the cage doesn't have a lock, you can actually free yourself. So the first thing is to free yourself from any situation, including the conflict. You must identify what the conflict is, and in order for you to do it, because we all have the ability to identify it, but are we willing to identify the conflict within? That is up to you. That is your situation that you can come out of, but you have to identify it first. Then after you have identified the conflict, you have to learn how to calm your mind down, right? You have to calm your mind down because your inner thoughts are almost likely to be negative and to have a loud voice of reasoning. But you have to understand that if I want to go somewhere, I have to understand that I want to calm my mind before I go into it. It's like, let me calm myself down. Let me in the car. You ever sat in the car and you had to calm your mind down before you go inside, knowing that inside the conflict may be in the room, but you want to calm your mind down before you get out of the vehicle because you know that you sometimes respond drastically to things. So sitting down, calming the mind down, breathing, trying to find small distractions or act or ways to develop activities in your mind before you go into a situation. That's what you're doing when you're calming your mind down. That's because you've identified it. And because you've identified it, you automatically say, boom, before I go inside this house, before I go inside this job, let me sit inside this vehicle and calm my mind down. I don't care. Let me do a crossword puzzle before I go inside. Let me listen to my favorite song. You can sing out loud. I don't care if you miss every note. You can sing out loud until you calm your mind down, and then you go ahead and approach and step into that situation. That doesn't mean you crazy. That means that you know and understand that I may have shortcomings like everybody else, but I am brave and I am smart enough to understand that I need to calm my mind down before I step into this situation. That's because you're learning, you're becoming a lot more literate to your inner conflict. And then after you've done that, then you have to understand that you got to stop ignoring and muting the voice inside of your head. Because when you're in that car and you're talking about, man, let me calm my mind down before I go inside, you mute that voice if you want to. You go inside and lose everything that you worked for. You lose your job, you can lose your family, you can lose close friends because you wanted to ignore the voice. Like, man, nope, I'm going in there. I'm gonna tell him what's on my mind. Like, why? Don't ignore that voice, because that voice may be the one that may talk you out of a situation that you could possibly put yourself in. Now, I'm not saying for you to, to be a punk or nothing like that. I mean, depending on how people see it, but whatever. I'm not telling you to not ignore or to brush everything off, but I'm telling you to acknowledge the voice that's within inside, and don't try to mute the voice that's inside of your head. You know, some people may say, oh, it's the frequency. Other people may say it's the Holy Spirit. Other people may say it's your intuition. Whatever it is you want to call it, don't ignore it. Don't mute it. Listen to that voice inside of your head, because you can't resolve what you don't acknowledge. I mean, look at it really. You cannot resolve something that you do not acknowledge that exists. But when you acknowledge that it exists, then you say, okay, let me sit right here. Let me listen to, let me look at it from a different perspective. Because sometimes we try to ignore and mute the internal dialogue, the conversations we're having in our head that our brain and our heart want to have with our mind. And because we try to mute that dialogue, we often do so because our inner and current circumstance or situation, we feel like we don't have time or the energy or the resources to deal with that decision right now. When you actually do, you're telling yourself you don't have I don't have time to be thinking about this. Okay, bet. Would you rather have time to think about this, or do you have more time to lose everything that you work for? I mean, choose your poison. Are you going to sit there and give yourself or create the time and energy to deal with it? Or are you going to lose everything as an outcome because you didn't want to dig deeper, because you want to stay on the surface? You want to scratch the surface. But instead, you can push yourself to the internal conversation and allow that thing that is within inside of you to happen in order for you to acknowledge and resolve the internal conflict. And to resolve that internal conflict, you must understand you got to honor those conversations of self knowledge. Honor those things, because that is what is going to get you through when you see these things come up again. Because you have recognized it, because remember, you've recognized it, you can calm your mind down, and you're not ignoring or muting those voices inside of your head. Then after you do that, then you can become profoundly self-aware. It feels so good when you have resolved a conflict within. It's like it's a newness that can come upon you because you feel like you've accomplished something. Don't you understand that progress breeds success? Because you felt or you've known that you have done this thing, and so now you can tell yourself, if I've done it once, I can do it again. If I have walked away from this terrible situation once, I can walk away again, because I've identified what the situation looked like. Those red flags that came up, I can do it again because I am strong enough to do it again. I have the courage enough to face my inner conflict, to have a much more broader external appearance, because my outside matches my inside. Because the internal conflict almost always manifests itself by engaging in or even initiating the external conflict, but it has to be initiated from the inside. And you may find yourself having silly arguments inside of your head, but you're going to have to be okay with that. And when you are okay with that, then your heart, your brain, and your mind is going to feel so much easier, because you begin to resolve or work on the conflict within. And the last thing, the quick bonus that I want to give you, when I found this, I was like, yeah, this is nice. I need to put this out, because it kind of put me in a different headspace just finding this, because it said when the inner conflict ends, that's when the peace begins. If you resonate with that, put that in the chat. Because when your inner conflict ends, that is the beginning of your inner peace. Now, that does not mean that it's going to be over, because inner conflict is something that can arrive at any time. But when you identify it and you begin to calm your mind or calm your nerves, and you don't ignore or mute that inner voice inside of your head, and you have become so self-aware that you can duplicate that process and put it on wash, rinse, and repeat, and do it over and over again. And because you've done it over again, it puts you in the space to say, you know what? I am just as strong today as I was yesterday. And because I am much stronger and I know and understand how I feel when I feel this way, I can do it again. And I'm not worried nor concerned about how other people see me. I'm not worried nor concerned about other people's thoughts, because it's my thoughts that's important. And it's not selfish for you to say your thoughts are important. That means you're self-aware about what you want and about where you're going. Sometimes you're going to need to go for a walk. Sometimes you're going to need to go exercise. Sometimes you're going to need to just sit in a quiet room and do nothing. Because when you're in that quiet room, or you're going for a walk, or you go for a run, whatever it is, that exercise can possibly help you see clear, or to clarify the conflict that's within inside of you, because it's you against you. Stop trying to compare and bring out the measuring tape and try to measure your success with somebody else's success. That can really create some turmoil within inside of yourself, trying to compare you to somebody else. You don't know how what that person went through to get their blessing, but you want to tear your blessing down because you've seen somebody else blessed. It's yours, and maneuver in that space and not in somebody else's space. All right, that's all I got for y'all. But I mean, y'all be blessed, and I'll see you tomorrow here at 7:30. At consistency is currency, and because consistency is currency, you have the ability to do it over and over again. Y'all be blessed. Welcome to the Morning Podcast of Choice. I'm your host, Mr. R2. Peace.